Hi everyone. So we are back on chapter 19. Can you believe it? Gosh, only 3 more to go. Unreal. Last time we left Mildred, she was just letting go of a broom above the ocean and falling through the sky. So let's jump back in real quick and find out what happens. Here we go. Instead of plunging into the soft, cold waves that she was expecting, Mildred landed with a jarring thud, half on something very hard and half on something firm, but soft. She felt around and realised, partly from the rocking motion and partly from the feel of the planks, that it was a boat. She couldn't believe her luck when a loud meowing began a few yards to her left. "It's Tabby!" she gasped, feeling completely hysterical with relief. Fortunately, she remembered the broomstick. Although, now it had found its owner, it would have hovered patiently above the boat till someone came to the rescue. "Down, broom!" called Mildred. "Down here and rest." As it landed neatly next to her, Mildred flung her arms around it and gave it a hug. "You are a brilliant, wonderful, magic broom," she said. "Thanks a million, billion, trillion." But the broomstick just stayed stiffly in her arms, like any old broom you might have found in a backyard somewhere. And when she let it go, it clattered to the deck, waiting for its next command. They're a curious thing, broomsticks. Mildred got up to feel her way to the cabin and tripped over the soft thing she had landed on. She put out her arms to try to ascertain what it was, and was appalled when her fingers closed round a cold, bony hand. There it is. Mildred leapt back in horror, wondering if perhaps she was having some awful nightmare that might go away if only she could wake up. With marvellous timing, the moon reappeared from the scudding clouds for a brief moment and revealed various things to the petrified young witch. The first was the astonishing sight of Miss Hardbroom, apparently fast asleep on the floor of the boat. The second was dear old Tabby, still trying to scrabble his way out of the impossibly small opening in the window. And the third was the terrifying sight of Cat's Head Rock, looming like a gigantic sea monster only a few feet away. The moon hung like a spotlight, as if some helpful person had decided to give Mildred a few clues. Then, just as suddenly, the clouds closed over it and it was dark again, though not as utterly dark as before. The clouds were not quite so dense this time, and Mildred could still see the rock, as well as Miss Hardbroom, stretched out at her feet. Mildred groped her way to the prow of the boat and hauled in the long rope that had been untied and left trailing in the sea. There was only one thing to do. In the few seconds that the moon had floodlit the scene, Mildred had noticed that the rock was full of jagged promontories and crevices. If she could somehow wedge the boat into a crevice and tie it to a projecting piece of rock, then they could perhaps stay there until daylight. Perhaps by then Miss Hardbroom might be awake and full of bright ideas. However, right now the wind was getting stronger by the minute and the waves higher, so Mildred had to think fast. In fact, it was amazing how sensibly she behaved on this occasion, bearing in mind how ghastly everything seemed and how scatterbrained she was most of the time. "Come on, broom," she said. "The rescue isn't over yet." She tied the rope as securely as possible on the back of the broomstick, then held the broomstick up as high as possible. "Off you go, broom," she commanded. "Straight above the rock. Now, fast as you can." The broom shot away like a missile, towing the boat along behind it with surprising ease. "Stop now," called Mildred, desperately, a little too late as the boat slammed into the rock, wedging itself perfectly into the boat-shaped crevice. Here she is, giving her commands. She was thrown several feet down the boat, head first into the cabin door, where she very neatly joined Miss Hardbroom unconscious on the floor. Mildred staggered to her feet and hauled the broomstick back into the boat. Oh gosh, here she is, been thrown about. She untied the rope and retied it several times around a large barnacled piece of rock, just in case the boat relaunched itself. In fact, it was quite a sheltered crevice, the wind being in the opposite direction and blowing the waves away from them. Here she is, tying up her ropes. Mildred opened the cabin door so that she could perhaps drag Miss Hardbroom inside, out of the cold. But the formidable form mistress was too heavy to move, so Mildred took off her sodden cloak, wrung it out, and draped it over Miss Hardbroom to keep out of the wind. She sat hunched up next to her teacher, rubbing the long bony hands in a useless attempt to warm them up. Gosh, here she is, being nursed to Miss Hardbroom. Tabby escaped at last through the open door and wrapped himself around Mildred's shoulders. Hooray! Mildred found him wonderfully warm and dry in the middle of all the wet clothes and breaking waves. She suddenly realised that Tabby could help keep Miss Hardbroom warm, so she draped him around Miss Hardbroom's neck and told him to stay there. She was so tired that she couldn't think any more, so she leaned half against the cabin and half against Miss Hardbroom to help with keeping her warm, and closed her eyes, hoping that perhaps it really was a nightmare, and any minute now the rising bell would clang through the dormitory and wake her up. Here she is. And that's the end of our chapter, but we're going to carry on. Chapter 20. Mildred awoke to the sound of her name being shouted very loudly by several voices. For a moment she thought she was on her mat at the castle, where she had woken up so stiff and aching from the draught at the window. However, this stiffness was 100 times worse, and her eyes felt puffy as she prized them open and looked around at the extraordinary sight. Miss Hardbroom was still in exactly the same position on the floor of the boat. Tabby was asleep, purring on Mildred's lap. The broomstick was lying across the 2 bench seats, and all around was a cloudless blue sky and a perfectly calm, innocent-looking sea. Mildred's clothes were so thoroughly wet that she couldn't imagine ever feeling warm again. Here she is, oh, poor Mill. "Mildred! Mildred Hubble!" called a voice from the other side of the rock. "Over here," croaked Mildred. "I'm on the other side, over here." To Mildred's eternal delight, Maud and Enid zoomed into sight on their broomsticks and landed on the rock just above the boat. They couldn't believe their eyes when they saw Miss Hardbroom. "Here they are, friends to the rescue." "Gosh, Mill," said Maud, "I know you and Miss Hardbroom don't quite see eye to eye about things, but what on earth's happened?" "I don't know," said Mildred. "I came to rescue Tabby, that's all, and Miss Hardbroom was in the boat when I found it. She's still breathing, but she's been unconscious for ages. We must get her back." "What's Tabby doing here?" asked Enid. "He's supposed to be at the academy." Here's Maud, interrogating Mill. "Oh, I'll explain all that later," said Mildred. "I can't tell you how pleased I am to see you. It was really grim last night. I didn't think I'd make it." "Everyone's out looking for you," explained Maud. "Poor Miss Cackle's nearly gone out of her mind with worry. Although when she discovered that Miss Hardbroom was missing, she thought you might perhaps be all right together. Anyway, this morning we all broke up into groups and set off to find you." "I know," said Mildred. "I know. Let's tie the rope onto one of the broomsticks and let it fly us home." "This one," patted Miss Hardbroom's recumbent broomstick, "was quite fantastic last night. I found it in the cave on the beach, and it seemed to know where the boat was." "That's because it's Miss Hardbroom's broomstick, silly," said Maud. "Miss Cackle found her cat Morgana on the beach, so she must have left her broomstick in the cave. I say, Mill, Ethel must be having kittens. I mean, we all heard her say that she let the boat out. Do you think she knew that Miss Hardbroom was in it? Perhaps she knocked her out and pushed the boat out on purpose, exclaimed Enid. Here she is, exclaiming away. Even Ethel's not that bad, said Mildred. No, she pushed the boat out because I told her I was taking it out to get the supposed treasure off this rock. I wasn't really. I was only going down the steps to feed Tab. I'd hid him on the boat for the holiday. I made up the story to put Ethel off the scent. I suppose she couldn't bear the thought of me possibly finding the treasure. She didn't know about Tabby being on the boat, and probably not about Miss Hardbroom either. She really did think it was just a boat. Anyway, let's get HB back to the castle as fast as possible. It can't be doing her any good lying here in those damp clothes. Ethel is an idiot. Fancy doing all that just in case I upstaged her by finding some mythical treasure chest. Mildred began untying the rope from the projecting piece of rock, and as she did so, she noticed that the rock was a rather odd shape, not jagged or pointed, but with neat, sheared-off sides, almost hidden beneath barnacles and fronds of seaweed. She scraped at the seaweed, and a large, unmistakable hinge appeared. Here she is, scraping away. What do we think it is? More scraping revealed a stout wooden plank, and another, and another. It's a chest! Gasped Mildred. Look! It really is a chest! We'll never get it free from the rock, said Enid. It's practically grown into it. Look! We could see if one of the broomsticks could pull it free, said Mildred. Miss Hardbroom's broomstick seems to be as strong as an ox. Let's try, said Maud. So they untied the boat end of the rope and tied it firmly onto Miss Hardbroom's broomstick. Pull, broom, said Mildred. Pull as hard as you can and stop when I tell you. The broomstick set off very fast, several feet above the water, until the rope was taut and the chest was wrenched with a sudden ripping of barnacles, years of sea and salt and swollen wood clean out of the rock face, where it fell conveniently into the boat, narrowly missing Miss Hardbroom by a few inches. Stop! Yelled Mildred. The broom was pulling as firmly as possible, nearly turning the boat on its side. Down and rest. Look at this scene. The broomstick pulling out the chest. Should we try to open it? Said Maud. It's very rusty, said Enid. I think we'll need a crowbar. Or dynamite, suggested Mildred. No, first and foremost we must get back to HB and get HB back to the castle. Let's tie the rope onto the front of the boat again and see if HB's broomstick can get us home. Perhaps you can both fly along the side to make the boat lighter. You and Tab can ride on the back of my broom if you like, said Maud. Then there'd just be HB and the chest for it to pull. Good idea, said Mildred. And we ought to both take off our capes and cover HB with them, said Enid. She must be half frozen. I don't know why we didn't think of it before. Maud and Enid both took off their capes. Maud laid hers gently over their form mistress, and Enid rolled hers up to make a pillow. Tabby, who had heard the conversation about taking him on Maud's broomstick, made a dive for the cabin and refused to come out. Never mind, said Mildred, scrambling onto the back of Maud's broom, which was hovering patiently with Maud already on it. He doesn't weigh much. He might as well stay on board. Here's Mill and Maud on the broom. Miss Cackle was on the beach with various members of Form 2 who had come up to report after making trips to search for Mildred and Miss Hardbroom. Look over there, girls, exclaimed Miss Cackle. Isn't that a boat in the distance with some of our girls flying above it? Everyone craned their necks and screwed up their eyes against the sun to get a clearer view, and as the boat came nearer, they could see Mildred on the back of Maud's broom. Enid next to Maud, and the spare broomstick pulling the boat along. They all let out a rousing cheer of delight. "Mildred Hubble," called Miss Cackle, not sure whether to be thrilled or angry. "Come here at once and explain where on earth you've been. You've been worrying us all senseless." The boat coasted along the breakwater, expertly steered by the broomstick under Mildred's orders. Everyone ran to help and stopped in their tracks when they saw Miss Hardbroom lying in the boat, wrapped in the cloaks. Here they are, being pulled back. Tabby chose this moment to come meowing out of the cabin and jump onto the chest. Miss Cackle stood and stared in complete bewilderment. So did all the other members of Form 2. "Oh dear," said Mildred. "This is all going to be very difficult to explain." Here she is. And that's the end of our penultimate chapter. Oh gosh, only one more to go. I wonder how Mildred's going to get out of this one. Well, we'll see you for next time, girls. So much love. God bless.